The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again. Add another swerve and then...
Oh shit! It's Vince Russo!
Vince McMahon's best kept secret.
I am the Antichrist of professional wrestling!
David Arquette won the world title!
I've got a wife, 3 kids at home, and I really don't need this shit.
How can this show be so awful, Mr. McMahon? I didn't think it was.
Viagra on a pole match.
And Hogan, you big bald son of a bitch, kiss my ass!
Judy Bagwell on a forklift match. McMahon, the family, The Rock, they screwed us all.
Now, you're the editor, right?
Mankind did it! Jumpy, beat me! Goldberg steered Russo out of the cage.
I'm from New York.
I'll get downright nasty.
This is Vince Russo's The Brand.
Hello, everybody. This is Vince Russo for The Brand. Listen, this is exciting to me, and I'll tell you why. Okay, there's one thing about Vince Russo. I am old school. And I know that I was able to have a job in the professional wrestling business for 25 years because of the greats before me who paved the road. Now, I've said this all the time. If it were up to me, the only people I would bring on this show is legends. Legends, because to me, without them, there is no wrestling business. They set the stage for everybody. Unfortunately, sometimes it's hard with the technical aspect to be able to talk the legends through Google Hangouts so I could see their beautiful faces on screen and you could see their beautiful face. So sometimes that's an issue. So I can't always bring on who I wanted to. I'm very sad. For many years, I tried to bring Ivan Koloff on the show, and Uncle Ivan just couldn't get down the video aspect. We were never able to do it, and as you know, Uncle Ivan recently passed away. But if it were up to me, this would be a Legends show only. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a freaking legend. This man is a legend, and you're honored. You should be honored that you're even listening to this show today. Because listen, everybody thinks Vince Russo puts over the Attitude Era. I think the Attitude Era was great. I say the greatest era in wrestling was the Attitude Era. That's BS. That's BS. I've clearly said, in my opinion, the greatest era in professional wrestling were the early years of WrestleMania, especially WrestleMania 1 to WrestleMania 3. To me, as a fan and a professional, that was the greatest time in wrestling. And today, I have one of the main eventers of WrestleMania 1 on my show, a man that kind of inspired me to do what I did. He did some legendary videos before WrestleMania 1 that I remember to this day. Legendary. It inspired me to want to be a writer and producer in the wrestling business. This is a man's man. This is a legend. This is Mr. Wonderful. Paul Orndorff is here today. Mr. Orndorff, I am honored to have you on my show.
Thank you, Vince. You almost brought tears to my eyes the way you said that and how you were so enthused about it. But you know something, Vince? Everything that you said was the truth. I gave my life to professional wrestling. I could have played in the NFL. I chose wrestling, and I don't regret it one bit. I'm glad that I was in all the WWEs and the other wrestlings and stuff that there was. Vince McMahon to me was almost like a father to a point. And I think a lot of him, and he's done a lot for me and for wrestling. And I'm just proud. I got a room full of awards and trophies. I've had stuff. Am I bragging? I'm not bragging. I'm just proud. I'm as proud as any football player because I could have played in the NFL and I didn't. I chose the wrestling because that's where my love was. And it paid off for me. I love it. I still love it. I'm
Paul,
proud that you got me on your show. Thank you very, very much.
Paul, I have to be honest with you. I thought I knew a lot about you, but knowing that you were coming on, I did even more research. Brother, when you talk about you could have played professional football, I had no idea of what a great collegiate professional football player you were. University of Tampa, 21 touchdowns, 2,000 purpose yards in your career. I got to be honest with you, I had no idea you excelled on the football field to that level.
Well, really, football was the first thing that I did, in junior high and then high school. And then I got a scholarship in college. And I stayed at the University of Tampa because I loved, that was my home. That state, Florida, was my home. I was born in Winchester, Virginia, but I grew up in Tampa, Florida, Brandon, just south of Tampa. And my father-in-law, Ross, he used to watch wrestling on TV. And one day he said, Paul, come up here, because I married his daughter. And he said, watch this. So I got to watching it. And one thing led to another every time. Every time it would come on, I'd watch it. And finally, one day I said, Ross, do you know somebody in wrestling that you can maybe get me to let me talk to him? Oh, yeah. And he said, Eddie Graham and Hiro Masuda. Hiro Masuda was the trainer for Eddie Graham. And let me tell you something. I thought football was hard. When they got a hold of me and they put me and they let me have a tryout, they put me through hell because I think they thought I was going to quit. But you know something? I'm not a quitter. I'm a winner. And I stuck with it for 9 months, 5 days a week, 6 to 8 hours a day. And that is no lie. That is the God's honest truth. They put me through hell. But I stuck with it. And you know something? I love wrestling. I am glad I stuck with it. I'm glad I chose it. I respect the wrestlers, most of them, not all of them, most of them. And wrestling has been good for me. It really has.
Paul, you know what I was surprised to find out about you? Because, I grew up on the East Coast, so obviously I became a fan of yours. Once you came to the WWF, that's when I became a fan of yours. But looking at your background, I bet you a lot of people don't know that one of your very first programs as a professional wrestler was with the great Jerry Lawler. I mean, two cornerstones of this business, and you kind of started out with Lawler. Can you tell me a little bit about that time?
Oh yeah, Jerry Lawler. Yeah, man. He we had some good stuff. We did some good things, and he knew wrestling. And I had such good teachers like the Lawlers and people like that I'm sorry, but it just ain't out there no more, And
You know, Paul, one of the greats that you worked with early on, too, I was reading about today, and one of my all-time favorites, and I'm hoping you could tell me one story about him, because, Paul, one of my all-time favorites that you worked with early on in your career, the Big Cat Ernie Ladd. Can you give me a story with the Big Cat?
Big Ernie, man, he was a trip, I'm telling you. One thing about wrestling, and I don't care, every wrestler had a personality that was so different that you liked him or you didn't like him. And I liked him a lot, you know, because I'm respectful to people. And when I got into wrestling and everything, and one thing that Eddie Graham and Hiro Masuda said, respect the other wrestlers. And I do that to this day. I respect them. If they're doing the right thing, in my opinion, the people, the fans out there, there's hardly no more wrestling no more because of just that, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, we're gonna get to that in a minute, Mr. Orndorff. I promise you that. I promise you. Let me ask you this, Paul, and this may be a tough question for you. Okay. Now you were you were born in the territory era. God bless you. You were one of the pioneers. You worked the territories. I know I've heard a million stories about those car rides, and that's where the education took place. Now, you literally rode with the greatest stars in the history of the business. Paul, I have to ask you, who was your favorite guy to drive in a car with up and down the highway?
Oh, man. I sure like Tito Santana. You heard of him, ain't you?
Oh, absolutely. What did you like about Tito? What was it about him that you enjoyed the car rides?
Because Tito was as serious about this as I was. Now, he ain't the only one. Now, Brian Blair was another one.
Mm-hmm.
Brian the Beeper Blair, same way. And there was about maybe 6 or 8 or 10 guys that I would put in that category. And that's the guys that I hung with. I stayed with them. And they stayed with me. You know what I mean? We took it so serious. You know, and it's kind of like Vince McMahon. He is serious about his promotions. And, you know, whether he thinks I like him or not, I do like him. I like him a lot. And he made me, he put me into the next level when I went with him, because he demanded you to be and do things and I did things that nobody else could do or did, because I took the chance of trying something that was completely different than what was being done for all these years and years and years. It was a new era, and I kind of worked that way.
Yeah, it was a new era, and Mr. Wonderful, I was talking about, this is a shoot. I can vividly remember the vignettes that you shot prior to WrestleMania 1, when it was you and Piper and Bob Orton in the gym working out, getting ready for WrestleMania. And I got to tell you, it was those that really inspired me, because of the characters and the uniqueness of every wrestler on the card. You mentioned that earlier, but somewhere along the lines, Mr. Wonderful, I think we've lost that. You know, back in your day, everybody was bigger than life. When Mr. Wonderful came out of that curtain, I stopped dead in my tracks. What do you think happened to the great characters in wrestling? Why don't we see that anymore?
I don't know, if there's just nobody to train them, I think they lost. They went and got all these other jobs because wrestling, it wasn't easy. I mean, you had to work your butt off. And Eddie Graham and Hiro Masuda and Mike Graham and Tito Santana and Brian Blair and all these guys, man, they loved it as much as I loved it. And that's why wrestling did so good back then, because they had a bunch of guys that loved what they did. They loved their job. And you know this, I don't care what your job is. If you love what you do, you'll have a job forever, in my opinion. And that's the way I was. My daddy was a butcher, and he worked for Likes Brothers. And he butchered for about 40 years, you know, before he finally quit because he had cancer and he had to quit. But I got cuts all over me because I'd mess with my daddy's knives because he'd leave them in the backseat of the truck. And I cut myself with his knives. So I got scars all over me from his knives. Now, pride. It's pride.
It's pride. Pride. It is pride. What a key word. I use that word all the time. Paul, I have to ask you this. Going into WrestleMania 1, Madison Square Garden, you guys, I mean, Paul, you had no idea that was going to turn into what WrestleMania became some 30-something years later. At the time, were you guys looking at that as just another show, or did you think this is going to be huge? What was your feeling going into the very first WrestleMania?
Well, you know, I'm not the good Lord, but I thought because of the talent and the Pipers and the Blairs and the Santanas and all this talent that Vince had too, Vince is, whether he thinks I like him or not, I do. I like Vince a lot, and he helped wrestling and made wrestling what it is, you know, and what it was back then, because he had, you know, he was just getting into it more or less, taking over and did the first WrestleMania and all that, because he knew that the talent that he had, and he took it and put it in that first WrestleMania. And I want to tell you something. I believe there was 80-something thousand people that saw that. And Hulk Hogan, you know, the Hulkster, man, the guy he was so smart, and he had so much pride in what he did and everything. He was smart. You know, he was ahead of himself, in my opinion, because you know something? If he didn't want to use me as his opponent, then I probably wouldn't have been doing it. But he chose me. You know why? Because we're both from Tampa, Florida. We're both Florida boys, and we stuck together.
Yeah, but come on, Paul. Give yourself a little credit. The Hulkster was smart enough to look at Mr. Wonderful and know that me and Mr. Wonderful can make some money together. Come on.
You damn right. You are absolutely right. You said it. I didn't.
There you go. Now, listen, Paul, what can you tell me, because you had a close relationship with him, and it was freaking magical. And there are a lot of young punk wrestling fans out there that have no idea what I'm talking about. You need to go on YouTube. You need to do your freaking research, because the magic between you and Roddy Piper on camera has never been duplicated. What can you tell me about your relationship with Roddy Piper?
Roddy, man, I love Roddy Piper. Roddy was so smart. He was so head of himself. He was one of these guys that he wanted a new future in wrestling. And he knew how to do it. He was smart, man. I'm telling you. Roddy Piper, to me, Hogan and people like that, where these guys were in a whole different league of what it is and everything nowadays. It was just a total, they were so far ahead of themselves. And then the promotions and everything, they knew that if they were to go out there and do something really, really unbelievable, saying something unbelievable, let your personality get into it. And that way, the fans will either like you or they'll hate you. And the fans didn't like me because I gave them more crap than they ever had. You know, it worked.
You know what, Mr. Wonderful? Can I tell you something that's bothering me right now? Can I shoot straight with you?
Yes, sir, you may.
You keep saying a Hulk Hogan ahead of his time, a Roddy Piper ahead of his time. Bro, I hope you understand that you, Mr. Wonderful, were in that same category. You were an entertainer. You had the body. You had the look. You had the gift of gab. I hope you understand that when you say Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper, you got to say Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Come on now.
Well, okay, I'm going to be honest with you now.
Put yourself over. Come on.
All right. I was better than all them put together.
Yeah, baby.
That. I did it. I had the body. I had the looks. I had everything. I had a whole head of hair. I had the attitude. I was a mean guy at one time in my life. I was born. You know, I used to be in a fight club where you'd go to these big businesses and we would fist fight each other. I did it. No lie, I did it. And it made me tough as nails. And I knew that I could kick all their asses if I had to. And I could have, and I would have if I had to. I had a few times with people, but I didn't take no crap from them. And when it made it look as real and believable as it would be, because that's the way I thought it was. I did. I took it to another level, in my opinion. That's the way I look at it.
You took it to another level in the opinion of everybody that was blessed to be able to see you. And I hope you realize that. And listen, there's no doubt in my mind, when I look at the WWE today, I think you could beat up 90% of the roster right now in that chair.
How about 98%?
God love you.
I'm joking, guys.
This is why you're a legend. This is why you're a legend. You are still on. You are still on like the day I remember first seeing you on my TV screen.
Really?
Yes. You know, Mr. Orndorff, can we shift gears for a second? Because there's something I want to really talk about. When I went to WCW and I was honored to get to work with you a little bit when you were running the power plant, would you mind if I tell a little story about that?
Sure, man. Hey, I trust you. I believe you. I believe you got respect for me. And I got respect for you. Absolutely. Go for it.
This is a true story, and I want everybody to know this because I'm going to segue a little bit, Paul, into today's business and the athlete of today. And this is how I have to set this up. I'll never forget this, Paul. I got the job at WCW, and I believe it was Terry Taylor who said to me, Mr. Orndorff, who is running the power plant, he wants you to come down and look at the students. So I said, no problem. I'm happy to do it. I went to the power plant in Smyrna. I sat up. I sat back. And you gave me a little bit of a clinic, and you gave me a little bit of a seminar, and you ran all your boys, every every single one of them. I'm talking about, Jindrak, Mike Sanders, Reno. I know I'm forgetting everybody, but you ran all the guys. You ran them. It was a discipline. It was like a football training camp, and you had them doing drills, and you had them working, and you had your whistle. And I never saw this type of discipline in my life. And Paul, this is an absolute shoot. When it was over, Terry Taylor turned to me, and he goes to me, well, Vince, what do you think? Who's ready? And Paul, I looked at Terry and I said, Terry, they're all ready. They're all ready. And that is why the natural born thrillers were born, because you made every one of those guys the best that they possibly could be. And I said, Terry, we need to bring these guys all in at once. They are ready. And I got to tell you, Mr. Wonderful, I never got to have this conversation with you, but that blew me away, because I expected, out of 15 guys, out of 12 guys, maybe 1 or 2 would be ready. You had every single one of those guys ready. That speaks volumes about you.
I tell you what. You brought tears to my eyes.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
I know it.
It's the truth. And let me tell you why I remember that so vividly. Paul, I'll tell you why I remember it so vividly. Because, Paul, a couple of years later, okay, like in the beginning of 2000, I went to TNA. And all of a sudden, I'm working with all these young athletes. And you know what, Paul? They were all entitled. They all wanted something handed to them. It was a different generation. It was a different breed. And it brought me back to the Power Plan and the Jindraks and the O'Hares and the Sanders and the Stasiaks and everything you did. And it was yes, sir, and no, sir. And when they showed up for TV, what do you want us to do, Mr. Russo? No problem. And that was all because of you. I think you may have had more of an impact there than you did when you were an active wrestler, because they were disciplined and they had pride and they were honorable. I don't think you see that today in the new wrestlers.
Well, let me tell you something. You just brought tears to my eyes, because you're right. It just, I don't know. I don't know if it's the showbiz end of it, that they've just overtaken it and it's all showbiz. I believe that you should know what you do, whatever you're in, a job or whatever you're doing, you need to be the best at it as you can possibly be. And you got to figure out that there's always something different that would make it either be a trial or an error. And I did a lot of that. And I figured it out that if I got the right bunch of guys and I teach them the way that Eddie Graham and Hiro Masuda trained me, and the pride that they had in their job, and I mean pride. Pride ain't something you just say. You got to have it in your blood. And those guys had it in their blood. And I would imagine that most of them are in the Hall of Fame. Whether they are or not, they should be, because they went through hell. 7 days a week and twice on Sunday sometimes. And I mean, I put them through hell. I broke them. And then once you break them down, and then you start giving them the things that you want them to do in wrestling, they did it. And guess what? It worked. And I didn't even know I was that smart. But it worked.
Paul, it worked, and not only the attitude of these guys, the yes sir, no sir,
Yes.
the respect of these guys, but the appearance. Every one of these guys looked like $1,000,000. And again, Paul, it's the word pride. And Paul, I look at the WWE today, and I got to be honest with you. When some of these guys come down the ramp, Paul, they look like my next door neighbor. And I sit there and I say to myself, where is the pride? Vince McMahon taught me, if you want to be a star, you got to look like a star. Paul, what happened to that? Why does it seem now today's anybody could be a wrestler?
I think that because most of these guys pay money to even try to be a professional wrestler. So these guys, a lot of them didn't care who they were or what they looked at. They just wanted the money. It ain't about the money. It's about the love of the sport that you're doing. You got to love what you do. And there was nobody that loved wrestling any more than I did. The Brian Blairs did, the Tito Santanas, the Bob Roop, Hulk Hogan's. Those were the guys, man, because they had a certain amount of pride. But I used to live in a trailer that was about 18 feet long. Do you know that? That's what I grew up in, a trailer that was about 18 feet long. And I lived with my daddy. And let me tell you something. It wasn't very nice. And everything that I saw on TV, I watched it. And naturally, football came. You know, it was my sport. But then one time, when my wife, Rhonda, her father, he said, Paul, why don't you watch this with us? And I got to watch it, and it was wrestling. TV wrestling.
Paul, let me ask you this question, because here's one of my biggest beefs. And here's part of the reason I'm really not a wrestling fan anymore. It's not the same to me. It's something completely different. It's not what I grew up on. It's not the profession I worked in. It's completely different. One of the main differences is, you know, all of a sudden, Paul, and I want to get your take on this too. When I watch a wrestling match now, all I'm seeing is high spot, high spot, high spot, high spot. There's no selling involved. The psychology of the match has gone out the window. You were in an era where it was the psychology of the match, and you believed everything in that match. Paul, why do you think we've lost the psychology today?
Well, I think a lot of you don't have, I guess things cost so much, and if a guy's got a big body, they think that the people's going to watch him, and because he's a wrestler, he's going to be a wrestler. It don't work that way. You're either a wrestler with a good body or you're a jobber. You know what a jobber is?
I know what a jobber is.
Right, or you're a jobber and wanting to be a wrestler. But because you don't look the part, you can't do it. You just don't have it. You see, there was a lot of pride. To me, pride is everything, damn it. If you got the military, like our military, our Marines and our soldiers, the Air, all the Navy and all that, they got pride. They teach them about pride. And you will get pride in the military, my friend. I'm telling you. And that's what they do. And that's why the United States is so damn powerful, because we do have pride in some things. Not everything, but some things. And wrestling was one of them back in those days. It was.
Why have we lost the pride? You know, you talk about jobbers, Paul. I remember the day in the WWF when the jobbers looked like superstars. Johnny Rods, Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler, the jobbers looked like superstars. When you came down that ramp, you were a bona fide star. You smelt like a star. You looked like a star. You carried yourself like a star because you had pride. Why don't they have that same pride today? What happened?
Well, do me a favor.
Yes.
Tell me what you think happened.
I think the tail started wagging the dog. I think you had this generation me where it was me, myself, and I. It was a group of guys that were entitled. They felt an entitlement. They didn't want to work hard. They didn't want to pay dues. And they started dictating the way things were going to be. And all of a sudden, when you don't have trainers like Paul Orndorff anymore that says it's my way or the highway because I'm going to treat you the right way, all of a sudden, I think the tail starts wagging the dog. I think that's what happened.
You could not have said it. I couldn't have said it any better than that. I would have said it a little bit maybe simple, but it was a whole different kind of back then. And it's just gone because they think because you're on TV that's it. Everything is TV now. But you got to realize that if you want people to come to all the big shows and everything, you start it on TV, but you do the show when the people there paying for the ticket, 45, 50,000 people, that we were getting a lot of nights every night. And it's just not, because the talent isn't trained the way it should be trained. Yep. And you got to have the right kind of people doing it. You got to.
And Paul, if you listen, you trained some guys that were twice your size, weighed more. People don't understand the Jindraks, the O'Haras, the Chuck Palombos. These guys were freaking monsters. And you had them all fall in line. You were the father. They were the children. It was yes, sir, no, sir. And that's the discipline they carried when they went to WCW. If you took that kind of regimen to the training facility today at the WWE, you know how many of those crybabies would try to get you fired, would sue you for harassment and this and that and the other thing because you were disciplined. You wouldn't be able to get away with that today, but that's what made those guys men.
You know something? You said it so damn good. You said it a little nicer than I would have, but you know it's the truth. What you just said is the truth. And that's what it is. Because, see, they think that they don't have to do as much. As long as they get on TV, that's all that matters to them. But it's one thing to be on TV, and it's another thing to stay on TV and don't do the same thing you did the week before on TV. You know, I never did the same thing the first 2 or 3 weeks. I would never go back and do the same moves and different stuff because I didn't want to repeat myself every week, the same old BS. And then you get, that ain't how you stay. That ain't how you keep people watching. That's how you shut people that turn the TV off like they've done now. And they turn the TV off because they don't care to watch it no more.
Yeah, and you know what, Paul? Here's a lost art too. Guys like you, guys like Piper, you talk about, Tito Santana, B. Brian Blair, that whole WrestleMania genre. You, Paul, you knew how to get yourself over. These guys don't know the first thing about getting themselves. So you knew what to say in a promo. You knew how to react with the fans. You knew what buttons to push. There's an art to getting over. These guys don't know how to get themselves over.
And it's not that they well, they don't know how, but it's how they're being taught. And all they care about now is TV. Oh, if you're on TV, you're gonna be something. Well, if I was gonna be on TV nowadays, let me tell you something. I'd be the baddest man that ever stepped on that TV nowadays. And I guarantee you, after 2 or 3 months, those people were going to either hate me or they're going to love me. And that all depends if I'm a heel or a baby face. That's it. They're just not trained, and they really don't know how to do it anymore. That's the fact.
Mr. Orndorff, listen to me. When are you making your comeback to the ring? Because I'm buying a ticket. What you tell me when you're making a comeback, what arena, and I'm buying the ticket. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, I do autograph signings, and if somebody wants me to be in their show or go there, not to wrestle, but just to be there.
No, I want you to wrestle. I want to see you main event. I think you could beat up 98% of the guys today. I want to see you make a comeback in the ring.
I couldn't do it, brother. I broke my neck. My neck was broken 4 times, and I was in the hospital, and it's...
But you know what? But you know why you wouldn't have to do it? Because you could just cut a promo and that would make money.
You're right. I could do that now. I can cut a promo. I'll cut that damn promo because I can do that. I just can't do the physical end of it. But if I had the right people and the right guys that wanted to do it, and you got to have the promoters, You got to have the promoters. And if these promoters don't want it, and a lot of them don't know, they just don't know. I know. I've been around it all my life.
Yeah.
And I know it.
You've been
to this day, I still know it.
You've been there and you've done that. Listen, I want to tell you something, Paul, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I got to tell you this, and I say this all the time. People who defend wrestling today and who think wrestling is great today, I always say this. I give them the benefit of the doubt because I realize they didn't see what I saw. Right. If anybody watched wrestling during your era, that was the greatest form of professional wrestling ever. And you did it. You've been there. You've done that. And I really hope you understand what a treasure you are to the wrestling business and how thankful there are millions of people out here that have not forgotten and are so thankful for the decades and decades of entertainment that you gave all of us out here. I hope while you're sitting there with the beautiful Brooke, your daughter, that you know this every single day. I hope you know this.
Well, I know it. I just don't get to hear it too much.
Well, you just heard it. You just heard it. You're one of a kind. You're a legend. You're the reason a lot of people got in the business to begin with. And I have to tell you, I look at you like a treasure because you're one of the last ones. You're a bona fide superstar, a man that lived on pride and honor and integrity. And I want you to know that.
Oh, let me tell you, you just brought tears to my eye. I know it. I know it now. Nobody's told me that in a long time. And when I used to wrestle, I wrestled for the fans. Mm-hmm. I wanted those people that worked their butt off to make $5 an hour or whatever they were making to give them their money's worth, and that they would come back and see me wrestle Hulk Hogan, Tito Santana, Brian Blair, all those guys, everybody that I was wrestling with back then, to watch us on the main event. That's how I made my money, is by doing more than anybody else did, so those people would come back the following week or the following month to see me. That's what I did.
Well, here we are decades later, and you have somebody right here, and there are millions of people like me that never forgot. And that's why it was so important for me to have you on this show, because I want to tell you, I've never forgotten the greatness of Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. There will never be another. And, you know, we're going back WrestleMania 1983. So we're looking 93, 2003, 2000. We're looking 25 years ago. I never forgot what you did and the entertainment that you gave me. And that's why it was so important for me to bring you on this show and speak for all of us out there that just want to thank you for giving us memories that we never forgot.
Well, I'll tell you what, you brought tears to my eyes, because you you had me on your show. You talk about all this past, and it brings me back to life again. And I respect you, and I would anytime you ever want me to be on your show, I will be on your show, because I respect you, and I respect what you're saying.
Okay, now, you know, Mr. Orndorff, what you just said, I have that on video, because I have every intention on bringing you back on this show.
Well, that's fine with me. I mean that. If I said, I mean it. And you got to ask me, though. You know, if you want me on your show, I don't want you to hire somebody else to ask me. I want you to.
No, I listen, as a matter of fact, I now have your phone number. I am going to keep in touch with you, and I am going to call you directly. Call you directly. Hey, listen, Mr. Wonderful, you got to understand, I was a little intimidated to reach out to you, one-on-one, because I'm thinking back in 1983. I'm thinking of Mr. Wonderful and Roddy Piper in that gym and rocking back and forth. I'm still intimidated of that guy.
Well, this is the way I looked at it. Back then, if you want something to be real, to look real, you got to just about do it real. And I believe in that. I don't believe all this fakey and all this crap and all this and that. And if you get a hold on it, you just do it so easy, though it don't hurt nobody. It wasn't that way. That ain't how we did it. It was a half shoot most of the time. A half shoot, not all the way. Half of a shoot.
You know why? You know why, Mr. Orndorff? You know why? Because you were real men. Real men. That's why.
You are absolutely a wonderful fan.
Now, Paul, let me ask you this. People that see this interview now, they're going to go back on YouTube. They're going to see exactly what I'm talking about if they never saw you before. And they're going to say that Vince Russo isn't as stupid as he looks, because this Mr. Wonderful was an icon. A lot of people now are going to be reacquainted with you. This is what I'll do. I know you're on Twitter. I know somebody looks at your Twitter account. I will make sure that after this interview, I give that address if anybody ever wants to book you for an autograph signing, a seminar. Yeah, I think you should go out there and just give seminars on how to be a man. How about that?
I like that. Hey, and if you can help me get the bookings and stuff like that, I could use it.
Well,
I want to do it for the fans. I want the fans' kids to see who their daddy was, and they used to come to watch, me wrestle, and the Tito's and the Brian Blairs and the Hulk Hogan's and all these guys that would, and I mean, there's a bunch of them. They had pride in what they did.
well,
My memory ain't real good, but I can remember some of it,
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm going to do, Paul? After this interview, I'm going to stay in touch with Brooke, and I will find out the best way to get a hold of you for autograph signings, for appearances, for seminars. I'll have a conversation with her, and we'll figure out how to do that.
That would be great. I could sure use it. I'll flat tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, we will make that happen. I will talk to her and we'll make that happen.
I wish you would, and I wish the fans out there, a lot of my fans that like me, and hopefully they don't like me no more. But if they want to not like me, I'm okay with that, as long as they want an autograph.
That's right. Hey, listen, it doesn't matter if they like you. It doesn't matter if they hate you, as long as they know you. That's it.
It's pride, and back in my day, and in your days, and back when this was, a lot of it was pride back then, man. Pride was a big thing back then. At least I think it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know about it anymore. They make it too easy.
Yeah. No, I agree. The business was built on pride. I agree with you 100%.
It really was. I mean, I'm telling you, when I went to Eddie Graham, my father-in-law I asked him if he could talk to Eddie Graham. Did he know him? He said no, but he'll get in touch with him. And he got in touch with Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham talked to me, and then he said, call Hiro Masuda. Let me tell you something. That was the beginning right there.
Yeah.
Right there was the beginning.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mr. Orndorff, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You made my dream come true. It was an honor. This was a great interview. It meant a lot to me, and I really do hope you come on in the future.
If I ain't on the show, it's because you ain't asked me to be on your show.
You have my word. There will be a return engagement.
You brought tears to my eyes, because it's been quite a while since I've been on any show. But I take pride in that. I do. I really take pride in the wrestling.
Yeah, I know you do. Well,
I love it.
I know you do, and you still do, bro, because the passion is coming through stronger than ever.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I need to be thanking you for everything you did for me. The great Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And listen, it was guys like Paul that built this company, that built this business on their back, going back to the territory days. These guys need to understand they're never going to be forgotten. There would be no wrestling business without them. And I was blessed to be able to see Paul Orndorff in his prime and to see what a bona fide entertainer superstar was. And you could see during this interview, he used the word pride over and over and over again. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that word on this show. It's all about pride. It's all about wanting to be the best you can be and not settling for anything less. And Paul Orndorff was the perfect role model when it came to pride. And not only do the fans know it, but the hundreds of athletes that he trained at the power plant know it. Every single one of them know the discipline that he taught them and the pride and the respect. And that was all because of one man, and that's Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. I want to thank him. I want to thank you for joining me today and watching the show. Take care, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again. Add another swerve and then put it on a pole again. Put it on a pole again. Put it on the pole again. And our square to quad is gonna get emotional as I wait to overbook the damn cards.